10 years, 357 days. That is the exact duration of George Foreman's exile from professional boxing. When he stepped onto the scales at the Arco Arena in Sacramento on March 9, 1987, the needle flickered at 267 pounds. This wasn't the sculpted, 220-pound engine of destruction who decimated Joe Frazier in Kingston. This was a 38-year-old preacher with a shaved head and a protruding midsection, returning to a sport that had transitioned into the era of Mike Tyson.
Punches around, see? This is Joe Frazier. What he's doing, he's catching them, see? And a real boxer, this is nothing but a target for a man who can stick him. Like stay off of range when he don't want to punch. When he's ready to punch,
The boxing establishment didn't just doubt him. They treated the comeback as a dangerous circus act. At the time, no heavyweight in history had ever successfully regained a world title after a decade of inactivity. The opponent for this unlikely resurrection was Steve Zuski, a journeyman with a 25-11 record. For Zuski, this was an opportunity to legally retire a legend. In the opening round, the blistering hand speed that once defined Foreman's youth appeared to have vanished entirely. He moved with a heavy-footed gait, absorbing Zuski's early flurries with a stoic, almost unbothered expression. Instead of the wild, looping hooks of his prime, George utilized a stiff, measuring left jab. He wasn't looking for a first-minute knockout. Instead, he was recalibrating a biological machine that had been gathering dust in a Houston ministry since his 1977 loss to Jimmy Young.
Not going to make it. A knockout in the 5th round.
In the 2nd round.
Scheduled for 15, the heavyweight championship of the world. Oh, a good right hand on the left-hand side of the face of Norton. Norton is a bit stunned as Foreman, and it looks like Norton has really been staggered as he went up against the rope.
By the 3rd round, the sheer physical mass of the older Foreman began to manifest in small, brutal increments. While Zuski stayed busy, his punches lacked the leverage to move the 267-pound frame of the former champion. George began landing a heavy right hand that lacked the velocity of his 20s, but carried the momentum of a falling wrecking ball.
Foreman twice coming up and under with the left hand. And remember, when you're watching George, you're watching a man who has been known to knock opponents out with glancing blows. His hands are still becomes a knockout punch. Doesn't always look like one, and Rodriguez goes down.
The crowd, initially quiet and skeptical, noticed the tactical shift. George wasn't chasing Zuski. He was cutting off the ring with economical steps, forcing the younger man into the corners of the Arco Arena ring. The power was still there, hidden beneath layers of age and a new, relaxed demeanor. The end arrived in the 4th round, as Foreman landed a series of thudding combinations that forced referee Lou Moret to step in at the 2:47 mark. It wasn't a highlight reel blowout, but a technical TKO that proved the Foreman punch remained a lethal weapon. Despite the victory, the media response was scathing. Reporters from major sports desks dismissed the performance, labeling George the great overweight hope.
The 2nd round, Norton goes down again. A left hand on the side of the head. Norton goes back. He'll have to take another 8 count. Doesn't. His legs are rubbery as the left hand goes to the side of his head. A right uppercut, a left jab, and a vicious left.
He is game. He doesn't know where he...
They pointed to his heavy breathing and the low caliber of his opponent as evidence that a man nearing 40 could never survive a single round with the top-tier heavyweights of the late 80s. George, however, simply smiled and collected his modest purse. By April 14, 1987, only 5 weeks after his initial return, George Foreman stepped into the showroom of the Aladdin Hotel in Las Vegas to face Charles Hostetter. The skeptics remained vocal, viewing George as a novelty act rather than a contender. However, the 263-pound Foreman displayed a subtle evolution in his defensive posture. Under the guidance of legendary trainer Archie Moore, George began implementing the cross-arm guard, a defensive shell where the forearms are layered horizontally across the face and torso. Hostetter, a mobile but overmatched opponent, found himself hitting a brick wall. Foreman's jab had transitioned from a rangefinder into a power punch in its own right, snapping Hostetter's head back with every extension. In the third round, a short, chopping right hand sent Hostetter to the canvas, ending the contest and proving that George's schedule would be as relentless as his punching power. The comeback tour moved to the Felt Forum in New York on July 9, 1987, for a confrontation with Jeff Sims.
Tackle down the sideline, and
here's a big third down. Let's see if the Duke D can answer.
George puts on third down, but a wide open man is Gibbs. Down the sideline for Georgia, is going to the end zone. Escapes pressure, throws on the...
This match provided the first genuine moment of peril for the aging former champion. Sims, a heavy-handed brawler, caught George with a massive right hand in the opening round that momentarily buckled the 38-year-old's knees. For the first time in a decade, the boxing world saw Foreman's vulnerability and his resilience. Instead of panicking or retreating into the frantic slugging style of the Zaire era, George remained composed. He leaned into the clinches, used his massive upper body strength to tire Sims, and waited for his opening.
Big George knew a hurt fighter when he saw one, and landed a thudding 1-2 combination. Forcing too tired to follow up, Foreman would allow Holyfield to clinch for the remainder of the round. He'd land a final parting shot just at the bell. However, the last several rounds had given Holyfield an obvious lead in point to all watching that Foreman now needed a knockout.
By the fifth round, Sims had exhausted his energy reserves against George's immovable frame. Foreman finished him with a flurry of heavy, methodical blows, securing a TKO victory that proved he could still take a world-class punch. Between fights, Foreman's training camp in Marshall, Texas, became the stuff of modern folklore, stripping away the luxury of his 1970s preparations.
Pretty visuals and emotional depth, making you root for him right from the start. Think when George finds a mentor in Doc Broadus, who spots the raw potential in the young man. Doc, turned trainer, sees something special in George's raw strength and size.
To build the functional strength required to move his 260-plus pound frame, George avoided traditional bodybuilding. Instead, he engaged in manual labor that mirrored his newfound role as a community preacher. He pulled a 1987 Chevrolet truck across a dirt lot using a harness, chopped wood for hours, and dug post holes on his ranch. This wasn't just a physical regimen, it was a psychological rebranding. He was no longer the acme of boxing perfection, but a blue-collar old man reclaiming his youth through grit. This unconventional conditioning allowed him to maintain a high level of activity as he prepared to fight for the fourth time in 6 months. On September 15, 1987, George faced Bobby Hitz at the Arco Arena in Sacramento.
Punches throughout his career. He's landed a few good solid shots here. Hitz' face is starting to turn red.
And already backing up Bobby Hitz, and when Hitz attacks, he bounces off George Foreman.
Oh, and a left again. Boy, did you see that fast come?
Hitz, a tall and game opponent, attempted to use lateral movement to confuse the older man. Foreman countered this by employing a technique he called the cutoff, using small diagonal steps to reduce the ring's dimensions. At the 2:57 mark of the first round, George landed a thudding left-right combination that didn't just knock Hitz down, it seemed to vibrate through the ring floor. The sheer physical displacement of the punch was terrifying to those ringside. While the media still joked about his weight and his affinity for cheeseburgers, the locker room talk among heavyweights began to change.
George Foreman is hit by a combination of punches, and down he goes. Look at down. He's fallen like a tree in the forest. He is felled by the combination of blows. What is he doing?
They realized that while George was slower, his heavy hands had become even more punishing because they were backed by 260 pounds of dead weight and perfect leverage. As 1987 drew to a close, Foreman faced Rocky Sikorsky in Atlantic City on December 18th. Sikorsky was a durable journeyman known for his iron chin, having never been knocked out in his prime. This match served as a critical stamina test for George. For the first time in his comeback, he was forced to go past the 4th round, entering the deep waters of the 6th. George's breathing remained rhythmic, a stark contrast to his infamous exhaustion during the Rumble in the Jungle. He utilized a pushing jab, a technique where he left his lead hand extended to obstruct Sikorsky's vision and push his head back, setting up the straight right.
It's enough punches to penetrate Foreman's crossguard once or twice before fading out of range or clinching. Desperately tried for one last knockout blow, but Holyfield remembered the punch from the 11th and wasn't about to get knocked down in the fight. He clinched so long that the ref had to forcibly push him off. As the clock wound down,
in the 6th round, the cumulative damage became too much. Sikorsky's legendary chin finally failed him under the weight of Foreman's relentless pressure, resulting in a TKO that silenced those who claimed George couldn't fight past 5 minutes. By early 1988, the comeback had evolved from a curiosity into a legitimate threat, but George needed a name that would force the rankings to acknowledge him.
Report I know we got when we first went in there, we'd have probably been shot down ourselves.
Than going up there picking up a guy you know would end up as being a POW or MIA.
That name was Dwight Muhammad Qawi, the Camden Buzzsaw. Qawi was a former 2-division world champion and a future Hall of Famer. Though smaller, Qawi was incredibly fast and possessed a defensive peekaboo style that had frustrated the best in the world. On March 19, 1988 in Las Vegas, the fight presented a classic David versus Goliath dynamic. Qawi spent the early rounds ducking under George's jabs and landing stinging hooks to the body. However, George remained eerily calm. He used his massive forearms to parry Qawi's flurries, refusing to trade at a high tempo. He was playing a long game, betting that his physical mass would eventually wear down the smaller, more active man.
Elizabeth, Joe Frazier. Look at him. You hit him in the solar plexus, breathing. You hit him in the chin, you're gonna rattle his nerves. You hit him in the heart, you're gonna make his heart beat. Square punch, George. Power.
The turning point against Qawi arrived in the 7th round. The relentless pressure of having 260 pounds leaning on him in every clinch had sapped the Camden Buzzsaw's legs. George began landing short, clubbing uppercuts inside the pocket, a range where many thought the shorter Qawi would dominate. In a shocking turn of events, Qawi, realizing he could no longer hurt the giant or escape his reach, simply turned his back and walked away from the fight in the 7th round. It was a technical knockout via retirement. George hadn't just beaten a world-class fighter, he had broken his will. The boxing establishment was forced to look at the overweight 39-year-old with a new sense of gravity. George was no longer a joke. He was a problem that the heavyweight division's elite didn't know how to solve. Following the Qawi victory, George embraced his role as a marketing powerhouse. He appeared on The Tonight Show starring Johnny Carson and Late Night with David Letterman, charming audiences with his self-deprecating humor about his diet. This was a tactical masterstroke. By leaning into the fat old man persona, he lowered the guard of his future opponents and built a massive fan base of middle-aged Americans who saw themselves in his struggle. Behind the scenes, however, his training remained surgical. He worked with Charlie Shipes and Archie Moore to refine his old man strength techniques, focusing on economy of motion. He stopped trying to throw 50 punches around, aiming instead to throw 20 that all landed with the force of a sledgehammer. This phase of the comeback was about more than just winning fights. It was about building a brand that Mike Tyson's promoters could no longer ignore. On June 1, 1989, George faced Bert Cooper in Phoenix, Arizona.
And that was a body blow, a sweeping right hand to the body on Cooper. Devastating blow right on the short rib. Right there.
And now he's Foreman. Under 15 seconds left in the first round.
When you get hit with shots like that, it locks your legs and you can't move. Not moving away from Foreman.
As we pause.
Cooper was a protege of Joe Frazier and possessed a devastating left hook that many believed would be the end of Foreman's journey. The fight was a brutal, short-range war. Cooper landed several clean shots that would have finished a lesser man, but George's thick neck and increased body mass acted as a natural shock absorber. In the second round, George pinned Cooper against the ropes and unleashed a series of short, devastating hooks.
It would just literally been picked off his feet.
Foreman hitting the heavy bag is one of the more prodigious sights I've had in my life. It seems to me that of all bags, including Sonny Liston, no one ever hit it the way Foreman.
Cooper's eyes glazed over as he sustained a barrage of unanswered blows, forcing his corner to stop the fight before the third round could begin. This victory was a milestone. Bert Cooper was a legitimate contender in his prime. The great overweight hope had officially transitioned into a legitimate top 10 heavyweight. By the end of 1989, George Foreman had fought 19 times in just over 2 years, winning every single match by knockout. His record stood at an improbable 64-2. The final fight of the decade took place on December 27th against Jerry Cooney, a match dubbed the Geezers at the Caesars. While Cooney was also making a comeback, he was younger and possessed one of the most feared left hooks in boxing history. The public was divided. Many feared George would finally be seriously hurt by a real puncher. But as the bell rang in Atlantic City, it became clear that George had reached a new peak of technical efficiency.
George Foreman, Evander Holyfield, and later Arturo Gatti. At its peak, boxing capital of America, with more fights than Las Vegas. Larry Hazard was the Commission Athletic Control Board in the old days, and he was recently reappointed to that position.
What happened in the decades and then going into the aughts, there was a perception...
He didn't just want to win. He wanted to prove that his 1970s power had been refined by 1980s wisdom. On January 15, 1990, the Atlantic City Convention Center hosted a crossroads for two heavyweights seeking redemption. Jerry Cooney attempted to find a rhythm with his jab, but George's cross-arm defense neutralized the famous Cooney left hook. 2 minutes into the second round, Foreman pivoted with unexpected agility. He landed a compact left uppercut, followed by a devastating right cross that left Cooney draped over the ropes, unconscious before he hit the floor. Referee Joe Cortez waved the fight off immediately.
And he's wearing his street clothes. He just took the top off, and he comes in like this. Like he's going seconds, he's cut. I see blood coming down my brother's face. He doesn't have the gloves laced up. I said, and Joe's just said rolling around like, whoosh, throwing these hooks, and he's not even turning it on. But it's Joe Frazier, the guy.
This performance silenced the critics who viewed George as a mere novelty act. By dismantling a former top contender with such surgical precision, Foreman moved his record to 65-2 and secured a date with the undisputed champion. The old man had officially earned his seat at the high table of the heavyweight division. The journey peaked on April 19, 1991, during the Battle for the Ages against Evander Holyfield. At 42, George faced a champion 14 years his junior at the Trump Plaza. During a chaotic seventh round, Holyfield connected with a barrage of power shots that would have floored any other fighter, yet Foreman remained upright, absorbing the impact with his massive frame. Though George lost a 12-round unanimous decision, he landed 191 punches against the world's best athlete, proving that his 1970s power and 1990s durability were a historic combination.
3 judges at ringside, probably holding the career in their hands. Hard to imagine that he could rebound in a business sense. Through our eyes, it appears he's not in danger of that.
His courage.
He didn't need the belt that night to prove his point. He had already reclaimed his dignity and rewritten the rules of athletic longevity. Tap the join button to support more long-form sports history like this as we continue to profile the legends of the ring.